Today I'm going to talk about substrates, growing substrates, also known as mediums. It's a conversation that we have with customers every single day because we offer such a wide range, and in hydroponics the medium is everything. Depending on how you're growing depends on what you're going to need to grow with. So it applies a little bit different to your soil, but all the things that we supply here at Franz can be used in or out of soil. Soilless mediums, full hydroponic mediums, and living soils. There are a difference, and they're for different applications. So what is it that you should be using? Well, I'm going to take you through that today, so hopefully you'll have a better idea, and so when you come in you'll know exactly what you're looking for, and we can help you a little bit more with the rest of what you're doing. So I'm going to help you grow with confidence today and just show you a few of those options. There's a few things that determine your substrate. There's your water holding capacity, your cation exchange capacity, which is a measure of how much nutrients your soil holds or your medium holds, which can be, you don't really want a high one in hydroponics because you don't want it to cling to your substrate. You want to be able to feed through and it stay in the water. Or if you're using soil, maybe you want a high cation exchange capacity so that it will hold more nutrients for your plants over a longer period of time. So we're going to talk about a few of those things. There's also your air-filled porosity and capillary action, which the air-filled is how much airspace you have available between your substrate, and your capillary action is how well the substrate pulls water upwards through to the top of your plant roots to give a full saturation. So I'm going to cover those things just quickly when I talk about each medium, and so you'll have a better idea of exactly what it is you want to use or need to use or could use or incorporate into your existing grow. So let's do that. So when talking about hydroponics, immediately if you're thinking full deep water culture or full recirculation, that's where your kind of hydroponics begins. You're talking about just a water solution. So you want a medium with a low cation exchange, and you want something with a little bit of capillary action and a lot of air porosity. So because you're going to be dealing with liquid, you need something that's a bit more solid and that you can run your nutrient through and it disappears and not much hangs around. So in saying that, let's start with the clay balls, also known as Hydroton or Leca. They're more brand names. They're all clay balls. So basically it's an inflated clay ball. It's pretty simple. There are some different kinds. We supply 2 different kinds. These are used mostly for you can use them in your vases at home, or for like orchids in a pot. You just add water and it sits in water in clay balls. You can use it in your deep water systems or your Kratzky systems where it's just supporting your plant and the roots are hanging in the water. Or you can use it in a recirculating system where you put it in your mesh pots, either in your NFT systems or your pot systems. And it can be up to 20, 50 liters of this stuff. You usually don't need a whole lot because it's just supporting your plant. But basically it'll allow the water to run through your roots so it can pick up your nutrient. It will hold a little bit of water and humidity for a period of time, a few hours maybe. And it's mostly used for bottom-up feeding or directly through feeding. So flood and drain systems or ebb and flow systems, recirculating systems, and NFT systems. This is perfect for that. So the 2 kinds that we stock, we have the Canna Aqua Pebbles, and we have these balls, clay balls, just your standard clay balls. So these are a 16 mil, that's your standard size. These ones are bigger, great for top feeding, mostly because they're a little bit lighter. So they're not going to be heavy in larger volumes, but the problem is if you try to ebb and flow feed these from underneath, there's occasionally the problem where they may float. So if you're going to be feeding upwards instead of downwards, you might want to try something like the Canna Aqua. So these are half the size, 8 to 16 mil instead of 16 mil. Bit of variation, most are in the 8. They're a lot heavier, they're a lot denser. So this little bag here feels almost twice the weight of this bag here. They hold a little bit more moisture. I don't know if you can see that, you can see it in the plastic there. So they will, because they're closer together, the air gaps are a little bit smaller. Gives you a little bit more water holding, but it means that when you feed upwards, they're not going to float. So that's your main differences. So for all the circumstances I've just discussed, clay balls can be a really good option. So continuing on the path of full hydroponics, recirculating or deep water culture, these two are a bit less used for your deep water situations, although perlite is often used in a deep water situation. Recirculating, however, very common. These two are used for mixing into other mediums, and you may already be familiar with them. So I am of course talking about perlite and vermiculite. Two things that you often see mixed together in a 50-50 ratio makes one of the best propagation or cutting, if you're doing cloning or cuttings. A 50-50 mixture of these two is one of the best tested out there for results, for root growth. The vermiculite on its own is fantastic for your microgreen trays and for propagating seeds or young seedlings. So these two are often incorporated into other mixes. So, you know, your soil, you'll often see soil will have a little bit of perlite in it, or maybe it'll have vermiculite in it. We'll show you these in a minute, but the vermiculite differs from your perlite. They're both created in a similar fashion. They're both a rock that has been superheated and has expanded through that heat to create these ultra-light, air-filled, beautiful mediums to use. So the perlite is a volcanic rock that has a high silica content, among other things. It has a really good capillary action, which means it draws water really well, but the air-filled porosity of it is sort of second to none in mediums, which is why it's always incorporated into your more high water holding substrates. It allows you to have a lot more drainage. If you mix 50-50 this with a garden soil that never seems to dry, it'll never stay wet, it'll stay dry. So this one can be used on its own in a full recirculating system. It doesn't hold onto your nutrients. It may hold onto water for a short period of time, but because there's so much air space, it tends to dry very quickly. So it's used in your systems, your recirculating systems that are a lot more often. It's a really economic way of filling up your net pots and your smaller seed pots, and it compacts really well. So this one is one of the most useful substrates that you can probably buy. It can be used in nearly every situation, whereas your vermiculite is a little bit different. It comes from mica that's been super inflated, so it's got that kind of gold shimmer to it, but it's like they look like tiny little bits of cork, the square pieces of cork. It does hold a lot more water than the perlite does, so it will hold a little bit more water and nutrients. It still has a really good air porosity. It's also a really good home for microbes, and it can be a really good bulk mixer into your soil as well if you didn't want to go as far as the perlite for drainage. It's a lot easier to compost as well, whereas your perlite, it can be difficult to get rid of if you're not intending to have it in your system for a long time. So this one is also used in many industries. Building industry, you know, it's used in, they fill bags with it in the opera. Like it's a surprising medium. Both of these we sell in the 100 litres because they are incorporated into everything else. Both of these can be mixed into your cocoa or your soil substrates to give you that extra air, the extra microbe space, the extra wicking capillary action, and overall are the most useful things you can use. They can be used alone as a 50-50 mix. They make a fantastic recirculating medium substrate. So highly recommend getting onto these if that's what suits you. Getting closer to our soilless mediums, as in they look like soil, they act like soil, but they're not soil, so they're soil-less mediums. These hold a lot more water, so their water holding capacity is much higher. Their air-filled capacity is lower, and their cation exchange, their nutrient holding capacity is kind of in the middle. So we are talking about cocoa specifically here right now. It's become, you probably already know what it is, cocoa coir. It's not peat. Cocoa peat is not cocoa coir. Peat is not cocoa peat. So there's a lot of confusion there. Cocoa coir is made from the husks of coconuts and it's ground up. There are a massive variation in quality in cocoa from where you get it. A lot of it, palm trees are grown near the ocean, so the salt in them can be really high. So it's good to get one that's RHP certified or that is horticulturally certified. And that basically means they wash all the salt out of it, and this having a higher cation exchange capacity means that it tends to hold on to things like calcium and magnesium. So if you're getting a cocoa, it's important to get one that's been buffered. And when I mean buffered, it means that they've already put calcium and magnesium in it to stop it from taking it from your plants. So if you're feeding your plants and you've got a cocoa that hasn't been buffered, you're going to lose a lot of your initial calcium and magnesium straight into your cocoa, and your plants are going to suffer from the beginning. So it's important to get one that's RHP certified. We don't sell any that aren't buffered or washed. So what is it? So your cocoa substrate looks like soil. A lot of people say, I'm here for a bag of dirt. It's not dirt. It's just coconut husk. It's spongy, it's soft, it's brown. It holds water really well, but it drains really well. And instead of your soil, in your soil, your water moves around your soil, and the soil rarely holds it. There may be peat or bark in there that will hold some water. The cocoa holds the water. It will draw the water in, which means it's much harder to get water logging or overwater your plants. And in cocoa, there is a massive variation. There's companies that will custom make it for any single grower. In general, the ones that are public access come in your standard varieties. Okay, so first of all, your straight cocoa. So it's made of cocoa fines. We've got the Can of Cocoa Professional here. There's nothing mixed in this. It's 100% cocoa. It's very fine granules, holds water really well. It's quite dense. If you water this and you have a young plant, you might not need to water it for a week or 2 weeks. So it's very highly used in seedlings, or if you just want a straight cocoa so you can mix your own blend, that's the way to go. It works a little bit better outside if you're using it straight because it does hold water really well for your evaporative sun. None of these cocoa have any nutrient pre-built into them, which is why they're becoming very quickly one of the most popular hydroponic mediums, because it acts like soil and you can water it like soil as if you've got a potted plant in soil, but there is absolutely no nutrition here, so you can feed it what you want. You can feed it hydroponic nutrients. Hydroponic nutrients cannot be used, unless they say otherwise, in soil. Organic matter has a high cation exchange, will hold your immediately available high strength hydroponic nutrients, and they will be unavailable to your plant. Cocoa does not do that. So if you want your traditional, I want to water my plant with a watering can, in a pot, inside, outside, wherever, cocoa is the way to go, and that's why it's one of the most popular. So going from your straight, we were talking about perlite before. The 70-30 blend of cocoa is the most popular thing that we sell. It has the 30% air, 30% perlite, allows for a much faster drying time, which means in hydroponics you can feed more often, so you can deliver your nutrients a lot more often. It also means that there's a much lower risk of overwatering, and it just means that it gives you a bit more of a buffer, a turnaround for your feeds. So that's a very popular one. It's pre-mixed. If you want higher percentages of cocoa perlite, you can buy the plain cocoa, mix it yourself. As an option, if you don't like perlite, some people hate perlite, especially if they have to get rid of it. So the cocoa chips option is there for people who don't want that. All of this cocoa can go straight into your mulch and your compost, by the way. You can put it on top of your garden, mix it with your potting plants. It'll increase their water holding if they go dry. It's an amazing substrate. Your cocoa chips is a 50-50 blend where you've got half your fines and then the other half of bigger chunks of cocoa. So those bigger chunks, they add your air the same way the perlite would. It's 50-50 because they do still hold some water, but it's more of a natural option. It's a more compostable option than you would be using if you had your perlite. So that's another option you can find. It's not that common. You won't find it at most garden stores. So it's something that we stock. It's a bit of a specialty item. So we've got that too. And then on your full right-hand side, it's an unlabeled bag, but this is just cocoa chips. So just the chunks. They don't hold a lot of water. They do hold water, but they don't hold a lot. So they dry a lot faster. Getting somewhere closer to your perlite kind of dry back. But again, if you don't want to get rid of perlite and you want something a bit more compostable or that you can add to your old potting soils when you're done with it, straight cocoa chips is a great alternative to your high drainage, high porosity substrates. So all of these we have at Franz, and they're all of our most popular products. In general, you can pretty much do anything through cocoa. It's not traditionally used in recirculating, although it can be commercially, just because the fines tend to clog up your system a little bit. It can hold a touch more nutrients, and in bulk it can't be sometimes it's not as cost effective. So it is generally held to large tree growers and things like that commercially. Otherwise, it's a great medium. It's the most popular. We always have it in stock and we can always get it. So try that one out. So I'm going to talk about this one on its own because it's its own beast. So I'm going to talk about peat. So peat moss, not to be confused with sphagnum moss, although they grow in similar places. You'd be very familiar with this. It's been in hardware stores forever. It was one of the first kind of soilless substrates for hydroponics. It was used before that. It's used in many other industries for many other reasons. It's similar to your cocoa fines, cocoa core fines, except this is it's finer than that. It's higher water holding capacity, higher cation exchange capacity, means that it will hold a little bit more nutrients, but it's still fine for hydroponics. It's still neutral pH. It can be a little bit more on the acidic side depending what you buy. This one, Canaterra Professional, has a little bit of growing nutrient in it, and I mean very, very subtle amount. So your peat is, it's a mined substrate. So if you're someone who's a bit environmentally conscious, it's one that you might want to think about because it is mined. It comes from compressed organic matter from bogs and marshes from thousands of years ago that have compressed underground, and it has to be dug up and treated and dealt with before it can be packaged and sent to you. There's supposed to be a very high amount available for the next maybe million years, but it is not a resource that it's not a renewable. So just to keep that in mind. In saying that, it's used from everything from, it's the closest thing to soil if you want to plant. It's also one of the best for seeding and seed starters. And in general, it's just a really good substrate. So now we're on to soil. So everyone knows what soil is, right? Well, maybe you don't. So there is a difference between soil and dirt. Soil is a combination of organic matter, mineral matter, living organisms, and aeration and substrate. So it's a whole blend of different things. No one knows it better than these two guys. The guys who produce these living soils, as we call them, because they do have living microbes, know it better than anyone. The profile on the back of these, the amendments, what these soils are made of is amazing. These aren't suitable for any hydroponic nutrient unless they say otherwise. We have a few brands that can actually be used in soil. In saying that, that defeats the purpose of a living soil. So these are living soils. I'm not going to go too much into the actual bags themselves because we have gone through these ones in other videos. Please check them out. But we do cater to soil growers as well, even though we're a hydroponics store. The high-powered Grow Dirt and the Easy As living soil are the two that we supply. We don't supply your normal garden variety potting mixes. So if you come here for soil, you're getting really good soil. So the Grow Dirt has 3 options. The Easy As comes in the 1. In general, you can use this for everything from your seed all the way through. You can do the same with these ones, although they've decided to customize a little bit. So we have our full strength living soil. We have a seedling version, which has a lot less of your amendments that provide nutrients because it's only for the first stage of life. It's got a little bit more aeration. The Grow Dirt Light is again a similar idea where it's got a 75% amended amount compared to your full strength. So there's, you know, that extra is just substrate. So it's sort of your bulk value for money in terms of the amount that you're buying and how much you spend on it. And this one's intended for you to use some extra boosters on top. So if you like using your teas, your dry amendments, or your organic liquids at certain stages of growth, this one suits you really well. This one you only need water. So the difference with the soil to everything else that I've shown you is that the soil will hold on, the organics will hold on to your mineral salts, to your nutrient salts, and that may not be available to your plant. So that's why you can't use your hydroponic nutrients in soil. Being that organics, the stuff that these are made of, they break down through natural processes and then the nutrients become available, and the bacteria and the beneficial fungus break those into forms that are available to your plant to then take. When you pour in organics, it's a similar thing. Whereas the nutrients for hydroponics, it's already available. So if you throw a ton of it into this soil, it's just going to cling to the soil and it's going to lock out your plant. You're going to have nutrient issues, deficiencies, and burning. You don't have to use those nutrients because these have everything. So it's as simple as it gets. You want to plant a plant in soil, it's soil, and it's really, really good soil. And the idea of organic soil, living soil, if you're going to get into it, it's not your normal potting mix. You keep using this soil over and over and over, and the way that you feed it and amend it and add to it just continues the life, like a big circle of life. And so growing as an organic grower or growing as a soil grower, learning those practices is a great journey, and which is why we only supply these kinds of soils. So if you want to grow soil, we have that too. To finish my spiel on substrates, I've just kind of got a little bit of an extra, something that's used quite often. So you would have heard maybe of diatomaceous earth before. It's usually a white powdery rock, kind of chalk-like. You can get it as a powder. People use the powder for pests and stuff. They put it over the top of their pots or they dust it on their plants, kind of like your ant powder sort of deal. So what it is it's a sedimentary rock of sorts, but it's made from the skeletons of little sea organisms over thousands of years that have just layered and compressed. So it turns into this white, powdery, chalky kind of rock, and they break it up, and it's actually very nutrient rich. It's not something that is usually relied on for nutrients, but if you mix it in with the soil, it can provide extra trace elements, calcium, magnesium. So what it's mostly used for, what we have it for, is we have two forms. We have the hydro chunk, which is one that you either mix in with your substrate, like I just said, to aid drainage and also increase those available elements. These are also very silica rich, which is the one I left out, so it will also add a little bit of silica to your substrate. The hydro chunk is mostly used at the bottom of pots for drainage or mixed into your soil for a bit more drainage, and it adds that little bit of extra water retention as well as the elements and nutrients that I was talking about. The D-nat is, as it suggests, it's a gnat guard, it's a gnat barrier. So it's a granular form. We also have this in the powder form, but the granular form is used on the top of your pots. If you're using finer substrate, so it doesn't work with clay balls, there's too many holes in it. But if you're using a soilless substrate or you're using a fine substrate, you can put this on top of your pot in about an inch or a 2-inch layer, and it prevents the gnats from getting in or out of the soil. It also works for all range of hard-bodied insects. It doesn't work for things like caterpillars, but any kind of hard-bodied fly, insect, ant, anything. So basically the silica dust will wear the wax coating off of the insect, and the insect will dehydrate, and it kills them. So it's a natural preventative if you layer the top of your pot with it. It's very hard to salvage once you finish a grow unless you can manage to get it off of the top. So usually people just mix it in with their compost. makes a great addition to your compost or your existing soils. But it is the best preventative, and sometimes it can work as a bit of a cure if you have a fungal gnat infection or some other kind of insect that breeds in the soil and then emerges from the soil. So for all of our substrates, this can be a good finishing touch, either to mix in for your drainage, to block out your insects and protect yourself from bugs, or just to add some silica, calcium, magnesium, maybe some trace elements to your soil substrate. You can use it for mixing into your garden beds as well. So if you have those kinds of issues, or maybe as a secondary thought, if you've come in and you're like, I want to do something extra, throw this on top or throw this underneath, and I think you'll be really happy with the results.